In today's episode, work continues on the platforms, I create a LOCO yard, and more details are added to Farquhar. I've set out on a challenge to recreate Farquhar, the final station on Thomas the Tank's branch line. While the Talyllyn Railway have restored Awdry's original layout, my model railway will take full advantage of all the latest innovations in the hobby. This is my most ambitious project to date, but what better way to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Railway series? Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome back to A Slice of Sodor, the series where I'm attempting to build my very own double-O gauge model railway of Farquhar, the final station on Thomas the Tank Engine's branch line. I am so excited for the episode ahead. We're really making progress with the scenery now, and in this episode I'll be doing a lot of work on the station and also the LOCO lay-by siding, which actually I think has ended up being one of my favourite parts of the layout. Don't forget, if you enjoy this video, or just the channel in general, then it would be great if you subscribed by clicking that button down below. It really helps. And of course, we do have to say a big thank you to Derails for sponsoring this series too. They're long-time supporters of the channel, and without them, none of this would be possible. So yeah, a big thank you to them. With that said though, let's head straight over to the layout and I'll show you more of what's in store for today. The scenics on the left-hand side of the layout are mostly complete now, with that end of the layout looking really good. The main feature of Farquhar is very much the station though, and while I have the platform already in place, there's still a lot of work to be done here. Let's look at the buildings first of all, with there being two particular structures for the station. To represent the main station building, I have this Pico laser cut kit, which I'm halfway through building. It's a really nicely detailed kit, and amazingly, it's pretty close to the structure that Awdry had on his layout. Then there's a little waiting room or goods store next to this, but I couldn't find anything that matched this exactly. So I designed my own building to be a close match, which I covered in a laser cutting video I made earlier this year. Now, I want to get the surface sorted out for the platforms, but first I need to address the end ramps. I'll add some extra supports here, which I've just laser cut from some spare material I had. A 2mm MDF surface is then added over the top to form that downward ramp. Some filler is then used around the edges just to blend in those gaps around the sides. And I'll add some where it meets the baseboard too, just to smooth out that joint. The same is done for the far ends of the platform too, with there being a few different ramps in this area. Again, laser cutting came in handy for these as I was able to cut them to the exact sizes I needed. Next up, I want to add some capping stones along the platform edge. So these have been made from Slater's plasticard cut into strips and then painted up to match the stonework. Before I fix them in place though, I'm just going to quickly paint the foam board surface grey. This is really just a base coat to stop the white from shining through, and as always I'm using cheap acrylic poster paints for this, so really nothing fancy. To get grey, I just mix a tiny amount of black into some white, and that gives me the desired colour. The great thing about acrylic paint is that it dries really quickly, so I can now attach the plasticard strips as well. I just run a bead of super glue along the underside of the strip to fix this in place. The strip is then moved into position, and thanks to the superglue it'll set in place really quickly. I can then just keep repeating this process along the length of the platform, adding more strips as needed. You might notice as well that I'm leaving a little bit of an overhang too. Just a millimetre or two, but this does help sell the effect that these are paving stones along the edge of the platform. Another advantage to using plasticard for this is that the material is thin enough to be bent down for the ramps. While real paving stones don't bend, of course, they would be set in at an angle, so this is just an easy way to reproduce that look. I'm also opting to put these strips down the rear side of the platform too. This won't actually be a functional bay, but the spur off to the tram line is so close here, it felt like it needed something for the edge. I'll most likely be placing some fencing down the back of this later on anyway, but I want to have this in place before I do that. Overall though, I really like how these edge strips look. They just make the platform feel a little less plain, and the white line along the edge makes a really big difference too. Now, I could leave the platforms here, but I want to add some additional textures to create a gravel-like surface. To do this, a layer of PVA glue is added across the entire platform. It's good to have a few different brushes on hand for jobs like this. For example, a larger brush is really handy for the general coverage so that you can cover the majority of the area really quickly. Meanwhile, smaller and finer brushes are great for doing the edges, and that's particularly important here as I don't want to get glue on the edge strips I just fixed in place. While I could have added these later on, by putting them down first, they'll feel more bedded into the surface once the textures are added. Speaking of the texture, these have once again been provided by our good friends Specialist Aggregates from their True to Scale range. This is their universal trail texture, which I'm just dropping into the glue, and it works really well as a nice gravel-like texture. You can see I'm being quite liberal with this, making sure that the whole area is covered. I want as much of this as possible to stick into the glue so that there are no gaps underneath. With this initial layer down, it's looking great already, but it's just a bit too uniform. The True to Scale range is really quite versatile though, and I'm going to use some of their universal concrete to add some extra grey tones to the gravel surface. I'm using a lot less of this and really just sprinkling it on to create some additional variation in the colour. A good tip for doing things like this is to drop it from a bit higher up. The higher you go, the more the particles spread out as they fall, which creates a much more natural look. Now, right at the end of the platform, there's this small little area that needs to be covered between the two tracks. I'll just continue the trail texture along here as well, just to keep everything looking consistent. I'll also use a tiny amount of universal ground cover over the top as well, and this will just create a worn pathway to and from that barrow crossing. I figured the signaller would spend a bit of time walking back and forth here, and it just makes the world feel a bit more used. With all the textures down though, I now need to seal them in place. First though, I'll just wipe away the excess scatter from the edges using a finger. You could use a brush for this, but actually I found that having that tactile touch can give you finer control. Either way, the result looks really neat, and you can see how the height of the scatters has bedded those edging stones into the surface. The whole area is then sprayed with a fine mist of water, which will just help the glue solution to flow better. The glue is then added from a syringe, and you probably don't need as much as you think. I'm really just adding drops along the length of the platform, and you can see it spreads out really well. And just for those of you who might be new to building model railways, this glue solution is made up of 50% water and PVA glue. And once that's all mixed up, you can then add in a drop of washing up liquid. This breaks down the surface tension and is what causes the solution to spread out rather than just balling up into droplets. This will not only lock all the scatters in place, including those additional layers I added over the top, but it'll also create a harder, more durable surface too. That's really important as I still have lots of detailing to add to this platform, so having a consistent surface to work with will be really useful.
With the glue down though, this now needs to be left a while to properly dry and harden up.
While the glue is drying, this seems like a perfect time to mention the sponsor for this series, D-Rails, who are one of my favourite model shops and online retailers. And honestly, there's lots to like about them, not least their free shipping on all orders over £20. I don't know of another model shop that offers this as standard. Usually with the big retailers you have to spend well over £100 to get free shipping. So yeah, that's a big win in the books from my perspective at least. It's just one of the many little ways that D-Rail shows they really do care about their customers. Not to mention as well that they're also running a special deal on the Pico Bullhead track in conjunction with this series. This is a return of their 369 deal that gives you various discounts when buying points. So a 3% discount on up to 5 points, 6% on up to 8 points, and 10% off on 9 or more points. So yeah, it's perfect for those of you building a layout at the moment, and you can get this deal by going to drails.co.uk/TMRG. And the deal also covers the whole bullhead range as well, and not just the specific points that I've used on Farquhar. That said, this deal is only available while stocks last, so do get in there quick if you want to make use of it. And yeah, a huge thank you to D-Rails for setting this up and just supporting the channel in general. Right, it's time to get back to the layout now, and I'm not going to be turning my attention straight back to the platforms because I've got another plan in mind.
In the previous episode, I created a coal yard next to one of the sidings, and I'm really pleased with how this scene turned out. Further down is the shorter LOCO lay-by siding, which is where the engines will wait and take on water between trains or shunting. So I really want this to be a dirty, grimy yard area, and I already have a rusty buffer stop from Pico in place here. I've got another building from the MS Models range too, which I'll be using as a little workman's hut for the LOCO crews. I want to be able to blend this into the surface though, so I've laser cut a base for the building to sit on, which is glued in place. The wood is then given a quick base coat of brown just to help it blend in. You might also notice there's a small hole in one of the corners too. That just gives me the option of adding LED lights to this building in the future. There's a few extra details to add to this area too, and because I've removed the oil siding from Awdry's plan, I've opted to include a set of refueling pumps for the diesel locos here. Again, these are from MS Models, and I really like the way these look now that I've painted them up. Meanwhile, the steam locos need water, so I 3D printed this water column, which has also come out really nicely. This was a design I found online, there'll be a link to it in the description, although I did scale it down by about 25% just so it fitted into the scene a bit better. Of course, the water has to come from somewhere, and on Awdry's version of Farquhar, there was quite a substantial water tower right at the front of the layout. I like this, but I do feel it obstructed the view ever so slightly. I could just move it to another location, but I quite like it being positioned here at the entrance to the yard. So for my layout, I'll keep it in the same place, but I'm using a platform water tower from MS Models instead. This is a lot smaller, so it doesn't hide the models as much when they go past, and personally I feel like this is a bit more appropriate for a quiet countryside terminus. With the structures mapped out though, the main issue to tackle in this area is the ground cover. Like I said, I want this to be a grimy, dirt-covered yard, and so I'm painting the surface in dark brown right up to the points where the water tower will sit. Now, the LOCO lay-by siding actually extends very slightly onto the next board along, so I'm going to separate the two of these before I move on to the next step. I'll then stick a strip of masking tape down one side, and this will create a boundary between the two baseboards. This allows me to work on the boards at the same time while keeping them separate so that I don't accidentally glue them together. I can then start adding some ground scatter, and turning once again to the true to scale range, this is their universal rail yard. It's a really fine coal dust which has exactly the look that I'm going for. I'm also making sure to cover up the bases for the pumps and the water column as well, which will really help bed them into the scenery. I feel like this coal dust has probably built up over time, eventually covering the concrete bases they were built on, which is something I've seen at lots of heritage railways over the years. Of course, the track itself has already been given a layer of coal and ash from back when I did the ballasting. This will just extend that look out further, and by the end of this, the track won't stick out so much. If anything, it'll blend into the yard even more. The same is done round the end of the siding too. The coal merchant's office from last episode will back right onto this yard, so I don't have to worry too much about the textures overlapping, as some of this will be hidden. And I blend in the base for the workman's hut too. This should give the building a solid base to sit on, with the coal dust going right up to the edge. I can also add a bit of variation to the coal dust with some universal Barry stockyard. This is a subtle effect, but you can see it adds in some nice extra brown and reddish tones to the ground cover. Now that I've got more of the surrounding ground cover in place, I'll add some extra coal dust to the track itself. This just fades out the look more gradually, rather than there being too much of a harsh divide between yard and normal ballast. Like with the platform before, it's then time to glue all this in place, and I'll be using exactly the same technique as before. And if you haven't guessed already, this is also the same technique and solution I use when it comes to ballasting track in general. It's a really useful skill to practice in my opinion, as you can use it for lots of different parts of your layout, especially when it comes to ground covers. A lot of people do tend to worry about ballasting and using glue in this way, but I do feel like the more you do it, the less scary it gets, and as with everything, you build up your own technique and way of doing things. Of course, if you're not intending to take your model railway to exhibitions and it's a static layout built in a shed or a spare room, then sealing everything like this could be considered overkill. But like I said before, it creates a nice hard durable surface to stop everything moving around, and it's probably best not to get these fine particles into the motors of your favourite loco.
I have to say, the scatters in the true to scale range do look fantastic, and I kind of feel like they've lifted my scenic work up a notch since I started using them. After all, for a Thomas themed layout, you kind of do have to get the cinders and ashes right, don't you? One thing I should note about covering everything with that glue solution though is that it does take a while for everything to dry. Usually you have to leave it overnight, but if the space is cold, it can take a few days. So that is definitely something to consider if you're using the technique yourself. But yeah, it does mean that we now do kind of have to wait around a bit. So yeah. Does anyone want to watch an episode of All Engines Go while we wait? No? Okay, fair enough. Well, should we just use some editing magic and skip ahead then? Yeah, let's do that.
Just like that, both the platforms and the yard surface have now completely dried, which is great. I'm going to carry on with the LOCO lay-by siding for the moment, as there's a few little details I can add to really finish off this scene. The water tower in particular is looking great, and I especially like the little drain cover that is fully embedded into the surface here. It's more details like this that I want to add around the area to make it feel like a working LOCO yard. Generally, I just want to create lots of clutter around the yard, and most of these parts are 3D printed, which has really revolutionized the hobby. Printers are now cheap enough that anyone can create items like this at home, or there are plenty of smaller businesses out there that sell these sorts of things at reasonable prices too. Either way, the little details like this can really sell a scene and bring it to life. In addition to this, I'm also going to add some patches of static grass to the yard. Obviously, this means I need to put down some PVA glue first. And you can see I'm doing this pretty much at random, just so it looks a bit more rough. .4mm spring static grass is then applied to the glue. By going straight in with this rather than a shorter base layer first, it'll make the grass look thinner and more weed-like, which is exactly what I want. This isn't meant to be lush patches of grass, just random tufts that have sprung up over time. And this of course adds some more colour to the area as well. Like I said in a previous episode, this area in particular is quite built up, and so I really am taking any opportunity to add some grass where I can. Once the grass is all down, I can then vacuum up the excess, and this starts to reveal some of those patches. It's a really nice effect, and again, it just adds another level of detail to this particular scene. Overall, it's really amazing to see how a couple of simple steps have really transformed this area. All I've really done is add a few 3D printed details and a bit of static grass, but it's given this area a lot more character and it stops it from feeling too bland.
I don't know about you, but I really feel like Farquhar is starting to come together now, and over the last few episodes it's been great to work my way through the various different scenic sections. Of course, I'm not done yet, there's still a lot of work to do, and if you're also excited to see where this build goes, then I do just want to remind you that you can watch the next episode straight after this one by becoming a channel member. I tried to keep this as affordable as possible, so it's just £1.99, which, like I'm always saying, it's less than the price of a coffee, and it'll last much longer too. You also get access to exclusive videos, plus the little Thomas emojis. There's lots more stuff as well. If you want to see everything you get by becoming a channel member, just click the join button down below this video, and it takes you to a page that shows you all the different benefits on the different tiers. Don't worry, it doesn't charge you unless you absolutely want to go through with it, so you're free to check it out if you're just curious. Yeah. But a big thank you to all of the channel members we have so far, because honestly, you guys are directly helping to keep the channel going, and it's because of you that I'm able to do big projects like this that we all get to enjoy watching. Like I said, if you fancy joining them, and more importantly, if you just want to see what happens next in A Slice of Sodor, just click that join button below or click the link in the description. And now let's head back to the layout and continue work on the station, which I haven't really touched since the start of this episode.
With the surface dry, I'm now clear to add some ratio fencing down the rear of the platform. You can see I've started off with the ramp sections, and the fencing here is made on a slight angle in comparison to the regular sections. For the majority of the fencing, I could just poke holes into the foam board structure of the platform. The fence posts are then inserted into the holes with a little glue on them to hold them in position. Now, I suppose I could have made some fencing myself, either through laser cutting or 3D printing, but I actually quite like the design of this. I also had plenty of this ratio fencing going spare from a previous build, so it's good to be able to finally put it to use. I've pretty much left them in the base white plastic they're moulded in, but I have given them a quick dust of weathering powders around the bottom just to give the impression of some light dirt. When it comes to the baseboard joint, there is a slight gap here where one section of fencing ends before the next starts up on the second board. I suppose I could fill this in with an extra panel if I wanted to, but this will actually be hidden by a building anyway, so I'm not too concerned. The far end of the platform was a little bit more tricky though, as there were various corners and ramps to contend with. Getting the fencing itself in isn't too much of a challenge, but getting it to match up with all the other sections does add a level of complexity, since moving it a millimetre or two in either direction can make it look completely wrong. I also opted to include some gates down at the bottom of the ramp as well. I'm not entirely sure what these would be used for, since there's already another ramp up to the platform, as well as a dedicated goods bay as well, but visually it felt right, so I'm sticking with it. The fencing looks great though, but there's another detail I want to add, which is the inclusion of some vintage signs. Like many things on this layout, this is something I originally did for Pitley, and in my opinion it really brought that station to life. Most of these signs came on a printed sheet and were then cut out individually, but there are one or two custom signs just for those that are really paying attention. I suppose this is also a good time to talk about what period this version of Farquhar is set in. I'll admit it's meant to be a bit ambiguous, but I suppose in my head it's meant to be present day, but almost as a preserved railway. It's no secret that I love modelling heritage railways, and presumably Sodor, and Farquhar in particular, have become a tourist destination thanks in part to Awdry's books. That would also explain why Thomas's branch line in particular is still run predominantly on steam power, but it also encapsulates the ethos for this layout in the first place. It's a modern take on something from the past while using new technology where appropriate, and that's much like real-life heritage railways. With all the signs in place though, the final task for this episode is to add some lamps to the platform. With the holes going through both the foam board and the surface of the baseboard, a metal tube can be pushed into position. The wires for the LED are then fed through this tube, which was surprisingly more tricky than it looks given how thin these wires are. Finally, the lamp itself is glued in place on top, supported by that metal tube with the wires accessible to be connected up later on. These working lamps are from DCC Concepts, and they're a really nice product in general, but this swan neck design actually matches the lamps Awdry used on his layout really quite well. I don't know if the ones on Farquhar Mark II ever worked, but my intention is certainly to wire these up, along with adding lights to all the buildings too. Speaking of the buildings, let's get these back in place. You can see the main station structure is looking a bit more advanced now. I just need to get the lighting installed and then I can start to assemble the roof. I'm really pleased with how the whole thing has come together, and it's been really nice to focus on getting these two very different areas completed. Overall though, the station is looking really good as Daisy arrives into the platform. Of course, there's lots more detailing to add to the platform in general, but it's definitely a lot easier to see the potential now. That's going to be it for today though, but if you're enjoying this layout build, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's still quite a bit more scenery to complete on Farquhar, but my plan for the next video is to get as much of this completed as possible. Don't forget, if you become a channel member, you can watch that episode right now, and here's a teaser of what to expect. I construct a car park, add more static grass, and complete the good stock.